You have never once made fire from absolutely nothing. Not one single time in your entire life. You flicked a lighter, pressed a button, or turned a dial on a stove. Someone else already solved the hard part, decades before you were even born. No matches waiting in a drawer, no lighter in your pocket, no gas line buried under your street, no backup bulb glowing quietly down the hallway if the power ever cuts out. Just you, the freezing dark, and whatever flame your ancestors happened to still be keeping alive. For most of human history, that flame was never actually guaranteed. The strangest part? Entire generations of your own ancestors survived brutal ice ages without ever lighting a single fire themselves. This is Nock. Tonight, his tribe's fire burns steady, fed all day by someone whose only real job is keeping alive. Go back far enough, though, and that fire disappears completely. In a deep, dark cave in South Africa called Wonderwerk, scientists once found something that shouldn't have been possible. Burned bone fragments, buried 30 meters inside solid rock, far past anywhere lightning or wildfire could naturally reach. In 2012, archaeologist Michael Chazon and his team dated this evidence to roughly 1 million years old. A newer 2026 study, led by researcher Leora Kolska-Horwitz, pushed that number back even further, closer to 1.8 million years. Someone, an ancestor barely recognizable as human by our standards, carried a burning branch deep into that darkness. And then, somehow, they kept it going. They almost certainly didn't know how to make that fire themselves. Not yet. They had simply found it, a lightning strike, a smoldering wildfire ember, and carried it inside on purpose. Then they refused, day after day, to ever let it fully die. Researchers even found signs the fuel occasionally ran strange and thin, possibly stray owl pellets tossed on when proper firewood ran short. Whatever kept that flame breathing, someone clearly considered it worth the effort. Roughly 800,000 years ago, at a lakeshore site in what is now northern Israel, that exact same pattern shows up again. The place is called Gesher Benot Ya'aqov, and archaeologist Nama Gornenbar found charcoal spread across more than 20 separate layers there. Generation after generation kept returning to that exact same spot, rebuilding essentially the same fire, using driftwood that washed up along the ancient lake's edge. Fish bones turned up scattered right through that same ash, which means they weren't only warming themselves beside it. They were almost certainly cooking their meals there too, meal after meal, for thousands of years running. For families living there, fire wasn't really a possession you simply owned. It worked more like an inheritance, passed carefully down, kept burning, almost never restarted completely from scratch, if anyone could help it. Then, an entire community's survival depended on one single flame that nobody could ever quite afford to let go out. Now, you could lose every lighter in your entire house and still be warm again within 10 minutes. Here's the part that genuinely stops most people cold once they hear it. In 2011, researchers Will Robrooks and Paula Villa reviewed every known archaeological site across ancient Europe. For roughly 700,000 years, hominins lived across that freezing, unforgiving continent and left behind almost no evidence of fire at all. Sites like Haysborough and Pakefield in England or Grandolina in Spain are absolutely full of stone tools. No burned bone, though. No hearths. Nothing resembling a fire pit anywhere in all those layers. Through repeated, brutal ice ages, somehow, these particular ancestors survived anyway, completely without fire. No firelight to push back the dark. No smoke to keep the worst predators at a distance overnight. No way to warm a body already shivering itself toward exhaustion, hour after freezing hour. So how exactly do you survive a genuine European winter with no fire whatsoever? You eat very differently, for one thing, leaning heavily on fat and marrow, calories dense enough to burn steadily from deep inside your own body. Raw meat and tough raw plants take far longer to chew and digest than anything cooked ever will. Some researchers, including biologist Richard Wrangham, argue that cooking itself later freed up hours of every single day once fire finally became reliable. Before that, those extra hours simply belonged to chewing, not to anything else. Some researchers even suspect that same raw, fireless diet quietly limited how much spare energy early ancestors ever had left over for growing a bigger brain. You also carry a body built specifically for the cold. Neanderthals in particular had noticeably more body fat, shorter limbs, and wider frames, all built to hold precious heat close in. You dig actual shelter straight into the earth itself, then line it thickly with fur, dried leaves, and soft moss to trap warmth. And mostly, you simply survive in numbers, bodies pressed tightly together through the absolute worst hours of the night. By the time fire finally became routine, generations later, it changed almost everything about how a tribe could actually live. Nights got longer, safer, and warmer, and cooked meat meant more usable calories from every single kill. Even much later, far closer to Nock's own particular era, fire still wasn't ever fully guaranteed. In 2011, archaeologist Denis Sangade studied two well-known Neanderthal sites in southwestern France, Pech de l'Aise and Roc de Marseille. During warmer periods, burnstone tools genuinely turn up everywhere across both sites. During the coldest glacial stretches, though, that same evidence nearly vanished completely from the record. His conclusion was refreshingly blunt. At least some Neanderthals simply couldn't make fire whenever they actually wanted it. They depended entirely on lightning, on pure luck, on timing they had absolutely no control over. Which means during the harshest winters of that entire ice age, some of our closest known relatives simply went without. No fire at all, for weeks, sometimes for months on end, deep into the coldest part of the year. It took an extraordinarily long time for any of that to meaningfully change. In 2018, researcher Andrew Sorensen carefully examined the worn edges of 50,000-year-old Neanderthal hand axes under a microscope. He found tiny, consistent parallel scratches, the exact pattern left behind by striking flint against a mineral called pyrite. Sparks on command, produced whenever they were actually needed, no lightning strike required at all. For the first time in this entire story, real solid proof. Some Neanderthals could finally make their own fire from nothing purely at will. Quick question while you're here. If your fire went out tonight and lightning were genuinely your only hope of getting one back, how long do you think you could actually last? Type your honest guess below. Nock's genuinely curious exactly how long you think you'd manage to hold out. Step back for a moment, and the whole shape of this story starts to shift completely. Fire, it turns out, was never really humanity's oldest tool. It was humanity's oldest ongoing responsibility, quietly passed from person to person, night after night. Someone in every single generation had to notice the flame getting low, add the next branch in time, and never once let their guard down completely. Lose that one job for even a single bad night, and your whole group could be thrown backward straight into the cold and the dark. For who knows how long. Ash still absolutely refuses to sleep more than an arm's length away from the fire pit, no matter how warm the actual night happens to be. Old habits, it turns out, tend to outlive the very reason they first started. You will almost certainly never have to keep one single flame alive through an entire ice age using nothing but driftwood and raw nerve. But every single time you flip a switch without thinking twice, you're quietly spending an inheritance that somebody else spent nearly 2 million years earning for you. A parent kept a fire alive through freezing nights so their children could simply keep breathing until morning. A stranger, generations later, finally learned to strike a spark on command, so the next winter wouldn't depend entirely on luck. So, how did ancient humans actually survive without fire? Some of them, for staggering stretches of time, simply never had to. They never let their one precious flame die in the first place. Others adapted everything about themselves instead. Their bodies, their diet, their entire way of huddling together through the freezing dark. And somehow, generation after generation, almost all of them made it through anyway. Same fear of the cold pressing in from every direction. Same fragile little flame standing between you and absolutely nothing. Same human, different world. If your fire went out again tonight, would you actually know what to do? Tell knock honestly below. Next time, what actually happened the very first time two tribes who had never met before came face to face?